Okay, so we'll be starting. I want to say welcome everyone to our presentation and of course, good afternoon. So for our long and actually not very long, just a bit short discussion, we'll be welcoming Miss Nami to start off and kickstart our presentation.
Thank you, Jane. Nationalism and the Filipino way. What is the characteristics that describe the current cultural issue? So, instead of using abstract symbols that are supposed to stand for collective history and nation state, Filipinos have a distinctive way of life and ethical standards. People cannot recognize that they belong together because the state has failed to mold Filipinos into a widely accepted moral order. This led to a deterioration of Filipino nationalism and furthermore, nation building will take a very long time to complete due to the need to resolve divisions. Therefore, rather than being a collective, Filipinos today are fractious.
So thank you so much, Miss Nami, for that wonderful insight. And I think the best person to provide deeper knowledge about our topic will be no other than Miss Hanali.
Ayan, maraming salamat, Madam Jane. At para mas mapalalim pa natin ang diskurso natin ngayong hapon, halina't sagutin ang tanong, what are the issues in the middle stratum of society? Politics doesn't interest you because you have no interest in changing a world that suits you so well. Eat it. This quote from the movie Enola Holmes summarizes the problem of the middle stratum. When the country was under martial law, it was also a time of state developmentalism, meaning the state was focused on bettering the economy. The formal education of martial law babies centered on technological advancements as the manifestation of progress. Their education lacked social sciences and humanities, which resulted in a generation of middle class citizens being out of touch with reality. Unfortunately, we still bear the fruit of this kind of mentality. The word apolitical even became popular during the election period after being used by people in privilege to justify their lack of awareness about the social and political issues of the Philippines. Bakit nga ba sila makikialam sa mga nasa laylayan ng lipunan kung komportable na silang nakaupo sa taas? Bakit nga nila gagamitin ang boses nila na higit papakinggan ng pamahalaan kung mahimbing na silang natutulog sa kanilang mga tahanan? And the worst thing of all, the country has inadequate scholarship for students that plan or are currently pursuing degrees in the social science field, creating another generation of STEM graduates that don't care about the country. This is an example of the American way of living which prevailed during martial law and unfortunately until now. It's sad that we continue to become unidentified Filipinos because we continue to cater the American way of living. And doon nagtatapos ang kasagutan sa tanong na ito. Jane, nasa iyo na muli ang mic.
Maraming salamat, Miss Hanali. Thank you so much for defining this. And I think kaya pa tong dagdagan ni Mavi. So, Mavi, take away the mic, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you so much, Jane. So I'll be discussing the dynamics that prevail over our civil society. So during the 1980s to the 1990s, there was a proliferation of cause-oriented groups and NGOs, which then caused people to think of civic consciousness as something that is highly important. The various cause-oriented groups and NGOs that are meant to be represented by those coming from communities the cause is centered on are instead headed by those hailing from elite backgrounds. So, for example, let's say that there is an organization that is heavily focused on agriculture or farming. And you would think that usually This would be spearheaded by those coming from the agriculture sector, those working it, or by farmers. However, we notice that there is a trend in which those who are rich, those who are powerful, are the ones heading and spearheading these organizations instead. So as a result, they become playthings to those who are in power, the organizations, I mean. So in order for the oligarchy to have a significant competitor, there must be a great number of citizens that are educated. However, there's a significant number of them that are migrating out of the country, resulting in a failure to develop a competitor against the oligarchs. It can be seen that those who hold a certain amount of power are the ones taking in charge of civil society, while those who are regular citizens are left to become, quote-unquote, hostages to the political interest of the oligarchs, according to Mulder 2013. The voices and needs of regular citizens are left unheard, and this is the dynamic that is prevailing over civil society.
So thank you so much for defining the dynamics of civil society. I think it's only right that we define what picture it is that the public realm defines. So I think the best person to shed light on this topic would be PJ.
Thanks, Jane. So what is the picture of the public realm? The picture that emerges of our public realm is highly individualistic. And as the previous article stated, everybody has to fend for themselves. We see the politicians clearly using the public realm to advertise themselves, such as the ambulances, the fire trucks, and the police mobiles they supposedly donated. They use this type of display to promote their political agendas. And individualism is also visible in the context of society, as Filipinos always seem to accept anarchic behaviors we're accustomed to, rather than actively asserting fundamental values to each other. In addition, Filipinos lack a sense of activism, and many simply try to ignore the social inequities around them and look the other way.
So thank you so much for that wonderful insight, PJ. And I think now that we tackled on individualism, it's only right to discuss further individual centeredness. Rafiy, would you like to take on the mic?
Thank you, Jane. And so about individual centeredness, we just tend to pursue our individual dreams and dreams for our family without thinking of how these aspirations will affect the whole nation. In short, our individual centeredness make it hard for us to find the common ground. This stems from the fact that we see our fellow Filipinos not as people whom we see as fellow countrymen with the same nationalistic aspirations, but rather as co-competitors in a society that have chronic social inequality and lack of social order. To most Filipinos, the only way to survive and even have a chance at social mobility is to live in a very practical sense, disregarding notions of strong ideological adherence or ethical principles and the lack of social solidarity.
Thank you so much, Rafiy, for giving us an insight on individual centeredness and how it affects our national identity. And with that, I think it's only right to provide context to our identity. And I think the best person to shed light on this definitely would be Tracy.
Yes, Jane, thank you so much. So for the sixth question, what are the issues with school and history in the context of our identity? Educated Filipinos are often at loss about what their roots are. Do you see where the issue lies in this statement? Educated Filipinos at loss. Paano pa kaya yung uneducated? According to PSA in 2018, 9% of Filipinos ages 6 to 24 are out of school. This puts the 9% at risk in miseducation. Therefore, they are vulnerable in misinformation and disinformation. Hence, it cripples the ability to learn and understand the real situation of things around them. According to the Miseducation of the Filipino by Renato Constantino in 1966, there has been much nationalist activity in many areas of endeavor, but we have yet to hear a well-organized campaign on the part of our educational leaders for nationalism and education. Therefore, there is no comprehensive educational program that has been advanced as a corollary to the programs for political and economic emancipation. Therefore, nagiging ignorante ang mga Pilipino sa mga isyong panlipunan dahil hindi sila marunong makiramdam. Why? Because of the educational system that we have today and the one that we had during the country's colonial period. Now, sinong nagpauso ng edukasyon for the public or public schools? Mga Amerikano. Why? According to Constantino, ginawang modus ng Amerika ang edukasyon para magpabango, para ibaling yung galit ng mga Pilipino sa mga Kastila na huling sumakop sa kanila. They acted as our ally, our saviors, kakampi, because the Filipinos has to be trained as citizens of an American colony. Therefore, the result of that is for the longest time, we were conditioned to think that the Philippines and the Filipinos cannot function nor progress without the help of other countries. At sabi ni Renato Constantino, the schools play part in the miseducations of the Filipinos. Why? There is little emphasis on nationalism. Patriotism ay tinuturo, ngunit hindi nagagawa dahil hindi na ipapakita. According to the reading, instead of presenting the cultural history of the slow evolution of a potential nation, political chronology takes over. Ngayon, ang resulta ay isang Pilipinong bulag, hindi malay, walang pakialam. Kaya kagaya nga na sinasabi ng mga sinasabi ni Hanali kanina, apolitical, politics is too much talk and little substance. Let's focus on survival and safety ng family natin and take solace in religion. Nagiging dependent sa ibang mga bagay. Dahil kahit iharap mo sa national crisis, ang ending, tuloy pa rin natutulungan ang mga dayuhan na nakawan at lapastanganin ng inang bayan. Ang sikat na tawag dito ay colonial mentality. And it keeps inferiority feelings alive, which means anything related to the US is superior. And sadly, even with the past administration's efforts such as Educational Development Decree, the Values Education subject in our curriculum, and the Filipino First policy, the Filipinos' inferiority complex towards foreign ideologies is still rampant in today's setting, and it continues to affect the formation of identity of many more Filipinos each day.
At dahil dyan, bigyan po natin ng isang malaking palakpak si Tracy sa napakagandang diskurso na ipinahayag niya.
Iboto si Tracy as president.
Tama, sir. Tama. Behavior po ang tawag dyan.
Galing, Tracy.
Ayan,
Dagdag ko lang
salamat
they
po.
did that during the Spanish time. And then the second, during the Commonwealth period, when our education was tweaked, it was more to develop workers rather than kaya yung social sciences natin mabababa. It was geared for industrial revolution. But nevertheless, it had the same effect. It magnified it. It perpetuated it. Go, go, go.
And thank
Number
you so
7.
much po, sir, for adding on to our discussion. So I think with that, we can proceed with the topic of national transcendence, of course, to be led by Josh.
Hello po, sir. Am I heard po? Ayan. To clarify lang po, magkasama po kami ni Mavi ngayon. Pasensya na po. Naglolo ko po kasi yung device.
Yeah.
Sa internet po.
Nagulat na ako ba't naging Maria yung pangalan mo eh. But sige.
Ayun na po, sir. To continue po. Ayun, thank you, Jane. Thank you, Tracy, for sa mga remarks niyo. And now, how do we achieve national transcendence? And what is the role in the state in achieving this? And what is the role of social or non-government institutions? The glaring issue is that our transition from cultural imperialism was never smooth because it was accentuated by the oligarchs who were manhandling and exploiting the society, which resulted in loss of credibility that they hold. And it also led to individual-centeredness in the middle strata. So yung ito kasi dumaan na po tayo ng Commonwealth. Coming from cultural imperialism, dumaan tayo sa Commonwealth kay Manuel Quezon, dumaan tayo kay Marcos. And ayun, di po naging maganda yung pamamalakad during that time. It contributed to a loss of national identity, which led to sa next na pag-uusapan natin, which is the Filipino tolerance. The Filipino tolerance is what hinders the nation to be progressive. It contradicts the Filipino first policy that Carlos P. Garcia has implemented. And I quote, "This will achieve with malice towards none, in fairness towards all." Continuing to let the ones in power take our loyalty for granted will result in our nation stagnating and, at worst, falling deeper into loss of national identity. So, paano po natin ma-achieve ang national transcendence? We should go back to the roots of how we were on the verge of it in the first place. And alalahanin po natin yung nangyari noong 1986. The country practiced and exercised nationalism because the overthrew a dictator with the
Napuputol ka. I think you have to
10-year
rewind
plan
a bit.
to quote-unquote revive nationhood. Hi, hello, sir. Hello.
Yeah. Can you rewind a bit about 2 sentences?
Hello,
Naputol
sir.
ka, pre. Naputol ka.
Napuputol ka ba?
Hello, sir. Okay na po.
Yeah. Okay na.
Sorry, start na lang po ulit tayo sa
No.
How
Two
to
sentences.
achieve.
Two sentences lang.
Okay po. We should go back to the roots of how we were on the verge of it in the first place and keep in mind the event that transpired in 1986. The country practiced and exercised nationalism because they overthrew a dictator with a faulty 10-year plan to quote-unquote revive nationhood. A progress-oriented approach immensely overlooked the importance of what humanities and social sciences contribute to nationhood.
Galing.
Opo, na-overthrow natin si Marcos and nalaman natin yung brilliance ng kanyang incompetency during his regime. But the intention was for the betterment of self and not the betterment of others. If we are to become a vigorous civil society, we Filipinos are able to mediate and best eliminate competencies from the higher ups, which should open up more opportunities for our state and local institutions to further empower, and yung keyword po natin, empower, and implement policies to start progressing to national transcendence. So, bakit po empowerment yung napili kong keyword? Because the citizens have to light a fire to empower the importance of being able to be treated fairly by the people in a government position who are taking their loyalty for granted. So, kumbaga, in-exploit po nila, like I said before. And also using the state's capacity to empower the practice of nationhood. And to conclude po, I firmly believe that to achieve national transcendence, it starts with a competent government. Yun lang po, sir. Salamat po.
Galing. Actually, pwede na tayong tumalon sa social accountability, which actually has empowerment as one of its pillar. But yeah, you guys, bullseye yung inyong presentation and it's well executed. Para kayo nag-practice, meron kayong dissertation, ang galing. I'd like to highlight some points in your presentation. I'd like to highlight how you contextualize the individual-centeredness with the public realm. That is so true because our individual-centeredness was very much based on the subjugation. Pag ikaw nagsasalita in public, sinasabi, sumunod ka na lang, ganon siya. And it's dominated by loud voices rather than thought leaders in our country. Tapos with the social media and the trolling, it even made it worse. So ang maganda kasi na-segue ninyo yung public realm sa individual centeredness, no? So that very few were able to do that. So excellent work. Tapos yung transcendence, actually correct. Empowerment is really at the core of this, no? The ideas are already there, but we fail to be able to empower each other, and the state has abdicated its role so far in trying to do this, and then the non-government institutions are not taking this on effectively. There are some spurts of organizations that are doing this, pero to also transcend from their roles and their missions to bring together a common agenda for the country, hindi rin ginagawa ng mga non-government organizations. Example is the church. Yung church is actually a very cohesive organization because they've been here for a long time, since the Spanish time. No? Pero when it comes to politics, lagi silang non-political. So anong nangyari, nasanay tayo, pati yung ating mga kababayan, na maging masama pag political, na dapat non-political ka. Ang nangyari doon, abdication din ng role yun. It's a disempowerment. So the transcendence calls upon both the state and other social actors to be able to really foster that empowerment. But yes, excellent. Ang galing ng group na to. Nakaka-threaten tuloy sa mga susunod. Okay. Congratulations to the group.
Thank you po, Sir. Will proceed po sa aming last destination.
Ay, meron pa!
Sir,
Meron
pinaka-last. Pinaka-last.
Hindi, okay nga eh. So, akala ko natapos sa transcendence eh. Okay lang, you can finish it. Go.
Yes po, sir. So now we've reached our final destination, and this really is just for us to sum up everything into a whole. So
Pwede
now
ko ba ito i-share sa ibang class? As an
yes po,
example?
sir. Sure lang po.
Yeah, okay.
Sure lang po.
Sige.
So yes, now the big question that remains is, how has the Filipino consciousness and identity been shaped? So now, I guess it's safe to answer that Filipino consciousness and identity is poorly shaped. And moving on, we have 3 bullet points here. So dito na nga nagkakatapat-tapat lahat ng nabanggit sa presentasyon na ito. So first, we have colonial mentality.
Wow, synthesize. Okay, great. Sige, tuloy.
Yes, sir.
Galing.
Very synthesized. So colonial mentality is a factor as to why national identity and nationhood itself is purely shaped and underdeveloped. Continuing to live under colonial mentality kasi, it creates an inferiority complex. So nakasanayan na talaga natin yung mindset na anything foreign is better than anything Filipino. And present to kahit saan tayo magpunta. I mean, makikita natin to sa discrimination between the English speakers and the Filipino speakers. Tapos, hindi pa doon nagtatapos, hindi lang sa lengguwahe, pati sa binibili nating produkto. Madami tayo dito sa Pilipinas na pina-prefer natin yung imported goods kaya sa locally produced products. So, not only do we prefer imported goods, the appreciation for our language and local goods in itself is very low. So ang nangyayari dito, yung consciousness is not strong kasi nga there is an absence of collective identity, unity, and bonding. And this is often manifested, sabi nga, in the use of language. So kapag hindi mo masyadong trip yung mag-Filipino, paano ka magiging Filipino kung hindi ka naman marunong mag-Filipino? So doon pa lang, nagkakatalo na tayo. So ngayon, sa second bullet, we have isolation. Related to sa individualism na nabanggit kanina. Kasi syempre, to be conscious and to identify with being Filipino, you have to participate talaga in living and practicing yung traditions natin, rituals, many more, di ba? That cannot be done if you isolate yourself from others. Sabi nga ng mga matatanda, hindi mo kaya mabuhay mag-isa. 'Di ba? And with that thinking, natutunan rin natin i-practice yung kanya-kanya mentality. O in English, we call it each to his own. And it causes us to create barriers from our other fellow men. And this is also in relation sa ating third bullet, which is class conflict. So, paano pumasok doon si class conflict? Kasi there is an evident gap between the rich and the poor. So, anong nangyayari pag malaki yung gap? Siyempre, kapag malaki yung gap, iba yung experiences. And since the experiences of the two groups are highly contrasting, nagiging mahirap tuloy para sa lahat na mag-settle on a shared narrative. Kasi nga, there is nothing in common. So, with that, nawawala talaga yung feeling ng sense of belongingness. And so, lastly, pinaka-last na, in summary, Filipino consciousness and identity. Ayan. Ayan nga po. So, in summary, Filipino consciousness and identity is shaped poorly because not everyone feels a strong sense of belongingness. Wala tayong nabubuo na shared collective narrative. Kasi nga, there is an absence of collective identity, unity, and bonding. So that wraps up our presentation for today. I really hope that everyone learned a thing or two, and this is the fruit of group 1. So please, if you have questions, feel free to throw them to us.
Hindi na ako magtatanong. Magtatanong na lang yung iba. Sige, go!
Thank you po, sir.
Excellent! Kudos. Palakpakan natin.